The pain of a severed mate bond is meant to kill a wolf. When Emma was cast into the freezing black forests of South Dakota by the man she loved, she welcomed the icy death. But the bleeding, monstrous beast she found in the snow wasn't just another casualty. He was the apex predator of them all. It was December 14th, the kind of bitterly cold night in the Black Hills where the wind physically hurts your skin. The Silver Pines pack house, nestled just outside the very real, very quiet town of Custer, was alive with the roar of celebration. It was the night of the Winter Solstice Gala, the night the newly ascended Alpha was supposed to officially claim his fated mate. Emma Hayes stood in the shadows of the grand staircase, smoothing down the cheap, thrifted fabric of her dress. She was an Omega, the lowest rung of the pack hierarchy, tasked with cleaning the mud from the floorboards and making sure the diesel generators kept running in the winter. But she had a secret that kept her heart beating through the daily humiliations. She was the fated mate of Alpha Wyatt Sterling. They had discovered it a month prior, in the quiet woods behind the old abandoned logging mill on Route 16. The mate bond had snapped into place, intoxicating and undeniable. Wyatt had held her face, kissed her deeply, and promised that at the Solstice Gala he would defy the pack elders, announce their bond, and make her his Luna. Emma believed him. She was 21, naive, and desperately in love. The heavy mahogany doors to the main hall swung open, and the music died down. Wyatt stood at the center of the room, looking like a god carved from marble. His tailored charcoal suit cost more than Emma would earn in a lifetime. Beside him stood Chloe Montgomery, the daughter of the pack's wealthiest beta, a woman whose family owned half the real estate in the county. Emma's heart did a strange, painful flutter as Wyatt raised his glass. She took a step forward, ready to endure the gasps and whispers when he called her name. "Tonight, we secure the future of Silver Pines," Wyatt's voice boomed, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Tonight, I take my chosen Luna, Chloe Montgomery. Will you stand by my side?" The room erupted into cheers. Emma froze, the world tilted on its axis. Chosen Luna, not fated. "Chosen?" Wyatt's eyes scanned the crowd, finally landing on Emma hiding in the shadows. There was no apology in his gaze, only a cold, calculating finality. He had made a political calculation. An Omega with no family money and no combat prowess was useless to a modern Alpha trying to expand his territory. Before Emma could run, before she could hide the devastating humiliation burning in her chest, Wyatt spoke the words that would sign her death warrant. He didn't even have the decency to do it in private. He linked his mind to hers through the fragile, unconsummated bond they shared. "I, Wyatt Sterling, Alpha of the Silver Pines pack, reject you, Emma Hayes, as my fated mate." The words weren't just a sound. They were a physical violence. It felt as though a rusted hunting knife had been plunged into Emma's sternum and twisted. She let out a choked, agonizing gasp, collapsing to her knees on the hardwood floor. The spiritual tether that connected her soul to his was ripped out by the roots. Blood rushed to her mouth, hot and metallic. She coughed, staining the white fabric of her dress with bright crimson. Around her, the pack fell silent. The stench of a broken bond, like burning hair and ozone, filled the air. They looked at her, not with pity, but with disgust. An unbonded, rejected Omega was a liability, a bad omen. "Get her out of here," Wyatt muttered to his enforcers, turning his back on her to kiss Chloe's cheek. "She's banished. Escort her to the territory line." They didn't give her a coat. They didn't let her pack a bag. Two massive enforcers, men she had cooked breakfast for just that morning, dragged her by her arms out the back doors and threw her into the bed of a rusted 1998 Ford truck. They drove her 10 miles out into the deep wilderness of the Black Hills National Forest, stopping right at the unmarked border that separated Silver Pines territory from the lawless Rogue lands. They tossed her into the snowbank. "Don't come back, Emma," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. "If you cross the tree line, it's a kill on sight." The truck engine roared to life, its tail lights fading into the swirling blizzard, leaving Emma entirely alone. The temperature was dropping below zero. She was wearing a thin dress, a pair of worn flats, and a soul that had literally been torn in half. The rejection of a mate causes a physiological shock to a werewolf's system. The internal wolf goes into mourning, shutting down the host's immune system, stunting their ability to heal, and ultimately stopping their heart. Emma could feel her wolf curling up into a tight, shivering ball in her mind, waiting to die. She didn't want to fight it. What was the point? She dragged herself through the knee-deep snow, her bare arms turning a mottled, bruised purple from the freezing wind. Every step sent a jolt of pure agony through her chest. She wandered aimlessly into the dark pines, the wind howling like a choir of banshees, welcoming her to her icy grave. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. Emma lost all concept of time. Her vision had narrowed to a blurry tunnel. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, and the violent shivering that had racked her body earlier had completely stopped, a dangerous medical sign that severe hypothermia was entering its final, fatal stage. She stumbled over a hidden tree root and collapsed face first into the snow. The powdery ice felt strangely warm against her cheek. She closed her eyes, ready to let the darkness take her. But then she smelled it. It cut through the scent of pine needles and frost. It was thick, pungent, and overwhelming, the metallic tang of fresh blood mixed with the acrid, burning chemical odor of wolfsbane and silver. Emma's internal wolf, which had been comatose, twitched. A primal instinct, deeper than her grief, forced her eyes open. She dragged herself over the crest of a small snowdrift and peered into a moonlit clearing. What she saw made the breath catch in her throat. Lying in the center of the clearing, surrounded by the mangled, dismembered corpses of at least 6 rogue wolves, was a monster. It was a wolf, but its size defied all logic. It was as large as a grizzly bear, its fur as black as a starless night. But the magnificent creature was decimated. Deep, jagged gashes tore through its flanks. One of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, but worst of all were the bullet wounds. Emma could see the faint, toxic green smoke rising from the entry holes in the beast's chest, the telltale sign of silver hollow-point bullets laced with liquid wolfsbane. It was an assassination attempt, highly coordinated and brutally effective. The giant black wolf was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Every exhale bubbled with blood. Emma knew she was dying. Her own heart was beating a slow, sluggish rhythm, the broken mate bond draining the last drops of her life force. But looking at the magnificent beast, a strange wave of empathy washed over her. She was cast away like garbage, left to die alone. She wouldn't let this creature die alone in the cold, too. Using the absolute last reserves of her strength, Emma crawled down the snowbank. She dragged her freezing body across the frozen earth, leaving a trail of her own blood from where the ice had cut her knees and hands. As she approached, the massive wolf's golden eyes snapped open. Even clouded with pain and impending death, the sheer power in those eyes hit Emma like a physical blow. The aura rolling off the beast was suffocating, a dominance so pure and terrifying it forced Emma to avert her gaze. This was no ordinary alpha. This was ancient, primordial power. The wolf bared its fangs, a low, wet growl rumbling in its chest, warning her away. "It's okay," Emma whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Her teeth chattered violently. I'm not going to hurt you." She reached out with a trembling, frostbitten hand and gently placed it on the wolf's massive snout. The beast flinched, but then, surprisingly, leaned into her touch. He could sense she was no threat. He could smell the death on her, smell the tragic stench of a severed mate bond. Omegas are often looked down upon for their lack of physical strength, but they possess a rare, dormant magic within werewolf lore. They are the nurturers, the peacekeepers. Emma had always possessed a strange, latent ability to mend small things. A broken bird's wing, a wilting flower. It required giving up a piece of her own energy. She had never tried it on something this massive, let alone a werewolf dying from silver poisoning. "You want to live," Emma whispered, looking deep into the wolf's fading golden eyes. "I don't. Take it." She shifted her body, pressing her chest against the wolf's bleeding side. She closed her eyes and visualized the tiny, flickering flame of her remaining life force. It was barely a spark, fighting against the crushing void of her broken heart. Emma pushed. She forced the energy out of her own soul and channeled it through her hands into the black wolf's body. The reaction was instantaneous. A blinding, warm, golden light erupted from her palms. The wolf let out a sharp yelp as the magic surged into his veins, actively fighting the toxic wolfsbane. Emma screamed. The pain was unimaginable. It felt like she was pulling her own veins out of her skin. The magic was demanding a toll, trading a life for a life. She could literally feel her own heartbeat slowing down with every second that the wolf's breathing grew stronger. Under her hands, the torn flesh of the beast began to knit together. The toxic green smoke dissipated, replaced by the scent of rain and dark earth. The silver bullets were forced out of the muscle tissue, dropping harmlessly into the red-stained snow. "More," the magic demanded. "Give more." Emma gave it everything. She poured her memories, her grief, her shattered love, and her very soul into the beast. "Live," she breathed out, her voice barely a ghost in the wind. The golden light flared one final time, illuminating the entire clearing like a miniature sun, before snapping out completely. Emma's arms gave way. She collapsed into the snow, draped over the now healed side of the massive black wolf. The cold finally faded away, replaced by a numb, peaceful nothingness. Emma Hayes exhaled her final breath, her heart giving one last weak thump before stopping entirely. The last thing she felt was the massive beast shifting beneath her, transforming from fur and claw into the solid, muscular chest of a man. Strong arms wrapped around her freezing body, pulling her tight. A deep, thunderous voice, vibrating with an ancient power, whispered into her ear, "I have you, little one. I have you." Then darkness. Emma didn't wake up all at once. Her consciousness drifted back in fragments, the rhythmic electronic beeping of a Philips IntelliView monitor, the stark smell of antiseptic mixed with cedarwood, and the soft, synthetic hum of a climate-controlled room. She opened her eyes, expecting the frozen canopy of the South Dakota pines. Instead, she found herself staring at an ornate, vaulted ceiling, carved from dark mahogany. She was lying in a massive, king-sized bed draped in Egyptian cotton sheets. An IV line was taped securely to her hand, dripping a steady cocktail of lactated ringers and synthesized wolf blood plasma into her veins. "You've been asleep for 9 days." The voice came from the corner of the room. It was the same thunderous, chest-rattling baritone she had heard right before the darkness took her in the snow. Emma bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. Pain flared in her chest, but it wasn't the agonizing, hollow void of the broken mate bond. It was a dull ache, like a muscle that had been torn and violently stitched back together. Stepping out of the shadows was a man who seemed to swallow the light in the room. He was well over 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block the doorway. He wore a simple black cashmere sweater and dark tailored trousers, but no amount of expensive clothing could hide the lethal, apex predator grace of his movements. His hair was jet black, falling slightly into striking, molten gold eyes, the same eyes from the clearing. A jagged, freshly healed scar cut across his jawline, a brutal reminder of the silver bullets. Where am I?" Emma rasped, her throat dry. "I should be dead." "Wyatt. He rejected me." My heart stopped. The man walked to the bedside, pouring a glass of water from a crystal carafe. He handed it to her, his massive fingers brushing against hers. A jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity shot up Emma's arm. She gasped, nearly dropping the glass. "You are at the Blackwood Estate, in the secluded mountains of Big Sky, Montana," he said, his voice softening slightly as he watched her drink. "And you did die, Emma Hayes. For exactly 3 minutes your heart ceased to beat. My medical staff, Dr. Gregory Harrison and his team, fought for 12 hours to stabilize you." Emma stared at him, her mind spinning. Blackwood? You're Silas Blackwood, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Silas offered a single solemn nod. I am. And I owe you my life. The rogues who ambushed me were armed with weapons no common pack could afford. Military-grade hollow points, liquid wolfsbane synthesized in a professional lab. If you hadn't transferred your life force into me, I would have bled out in that snow. Emma looked down at her pale hands. The frostbite was completely gone. But how am I alive? An Omega can't survive a severed fated bond. The internal shock. An Omega cannot, Silas agreed, pulling up a heavy leather chair and sitting beside the bed. But you are no longer just an Omega, Emma. When you poured your soul into my body to heal my wounds, you left the doorway open. My wolf realized you were slipping away. In the final moments of your life, my wolf latched onto your fading spirit. I anchored you to my own soul. Emma's breath hitched. She had read about this in the oldest, most guarded pack archives. A soul tether. It was a legendary, ancient magic. It only occurred when a wolf of royal blood willingly bound their life force to another, sharing one soul across two bodies. It was significantly rarer and infinitely stronger than a biological fated mate bond. You tied your life to mine, she whispered, horrified and awed. If I die, you die. Then I suppose I will have to ensure nothing ever harms you again, Silas stated, the absolute certainty in his voice sending a shiver down her spine. Your broken bond with the boy in Silver Pines has been overwritten by the tether. You belong to the North now. You belong to me. Over the next 3 weeks, Emma's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The soul tether fundamentally changed her biology. Her senses sharpened to a razor's edge. She could hear the snow falling outside the triple-paned glass windows. She could smell the exact blend of imported coffee brewing in the kitchen 3 floors down. The frail, submissive instincts of an Omega were burned away, replaced by the calm, terrifying poise of a Luna. But alongside her physical recovery came a dark revelation. One evening, Silas called Emma into his private study. The room was a fortress of leather and old books, dominated by a massive oak desk. On the desk lay a series of manila folders, bank statements, and a terrifyingly familiar silver bullet sealed in a biohazard bag. My intelligence network in Cheyenne just finished tracing the funds used to hire the rogues who attacked me, Silas said, his jaw tightening as he looked at her. He hated bringing the pain of her past back into her sanctuary, but she needed to know. He slid a bank statement across the desk. Emma looked down. It was a wire transfer from a secure offshore account at Cayman National Bank, routed through a shell company in Nevada, but the original source of the funds was crystal clear. The Montgomery Trust, Chloe Montgomery, Wyatt's new chosen Luna. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Chloe funded the assassination attempt? Not just Chloe, Silas growled, his golden eyes flashing with a dangerous, lethal light. Wyatt Sterling authorized the movement of the pack's assets to cover the paper trail. He's trying to consolidate power in the South. Taking out the Alpha King would throw the entire continent into chaos, allowing a power-hungry upstart like Wyatt to seize territory during the fallout. Emma gripped the edge of the desk. The man who had humiliated her, broken her heart, and left her to die in the freezing wilderness hadn't just betrayed her. He was a traitor to their entire species. They think you're dead, Emma, Silas said quietly, walking around the desk to stand before her. He reached out, his large, warm hand gently cupping her cheek. The soul tether hummed between them, a comforting, iron-clad shield of protection. In 2 days, the annual Continental Alpha Summit is being held in Colorado. Wyatt will be there, trying to secure a seat on the High Council. What do you want to do? Emma looked up into the eyes of the most powerful wolf on the planet. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel fear. She felt righteous, burning fury. I want to show them, Emma whispered, her voice steady and laced with an icy command that made Silas's wolf purr in approval. I want to show them exactly what they threw away. The Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs was the epitome of old-world luxury. Seated at the base of the Rocky Mountains, its sprawling, manicured grounds and grand ballrooms were the perfect venue for the annual Continental Alpha Summit. Valets rushed to park an endless line of Mercedes G-Wagons, Range Rovers, and Bentleys as the most elite werewolf bloodlines in North America gathered to discuss territory, trade, and law. Inside the grand ballroom, beneath glittering crystal chandeliers, Wyatt Sterling was holding court. He looked every inch the rising star. A smug smile plastered on his face as he held a glass of expensive bourbon. Chloe clung to his arm, dripping in diamonds, purchased with the very blood money used to fund Silas's assassination. The Silver Pines pack is expanding rapidly, Wyatt was boasting to an older alpha from Oregon. We've secured the mining rights in the Lower Valley, and frankly, with the recent rumors of instability in the north, it's time for the younger generation to step up and lead the council. He was implying Silas was weak. He was implying the king was dead. Suddenly the heavy, brass-studded oak doors of the ballroom slammed open with a force that cracked the plaster around the hinges. The music stopped abruptly. Conversations died in an instant. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating under the weight of an oppressive, ancient aura. Every wolf in the room, from the lowest beta to the most arrogant alpha, felt an instinctive biological urge to bare their throats in submission. Silas Blackwood walked into the room. He wore a bespoke, midnight blue suit, his presence commanding absolute, terrified silence. He was alive, he was flawless, and he looked ready to commit murder. Wyatt's smug smile vanished, replaced by a pale, sickly dread. He took an involuntary step back, his hand shaking so badly that bourbon spilled over the rim of his glass onto Chloe's expensive gown. But Silas wasn't alone. Stepping out from behind the Alpha King's massive frame was a woman. She wore a floor-length, backless gown of blood-red silk that clung to her new, radiant curves. Her hair was swept up, revealing a delicate neck adorned with a heavy, priceless diamond necklace that bore the crest of the Blackwood royal family. She exuded a power and confidence that eclipsed every other woman in the room. It took Wyatt several seconds to recognize the striking, breathtaking woman walking beside the king. When he did, he physically choked on his breath. "Emma," Wyatt whispered, his voice cracking. The entire room watched as Silas and Emma walked directly toward the center of the ballroom. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Emma kept her chin high, her eyes locking onto Wyatt's. She didn't see the man she once loved. She saw a pathetic, trembling coward. "Alpha Sterling," Silas's voice echoed through the silent hall, dripping with deadly calm. "You seem surprised to see me. Or perhaps you're just surprised to see my Luna." Luna? The word ripped through the crowd like a shockwave. Whispers broke out. The king had been mateless for centuries. That's impossible," Wyatt stammered, his facade crumbling. He pointed a trembling finger at Emma. "She's an Omega, a rejected stray. She belongs to the Silver Pines pack. She belongs to no one but me," Silas roared, his voice layered with his alpha command. The sheer force of it forced half the room to their knees. Wyatt buckled, his knees smashing into the marble floor. Chloe shrieked as she was forced down beside him. Silas gestured to his lead enforcer, who stepped forward with a thick leather briefcase. He popped the latches and dumped the contents onto the polished floor right in front of Wyatt. Stacks of printed bank transfers, offshore account records, encrypted emails, and a single, biohazard-sealed silver hollow-point bullet clattered against the marble. "High treason," Silas declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Conspiracy to assassinate the Alpha King, funded by the Montgomery Trust, authorized by Alpha Wyatt Sterling." Wyatt stared at the evidence, his eyes wide with sheer terror. "No! It's a lie! Emma, tell him we were mates. Tell him I wouldn't do this." Emma stepped forward. The girl who had cowered in the shadows of the Silver Pines packhouse was dead. In her place stood the Queen of the North. She looked down at the man who had ordered her thrown into the freezing snow to die. "You severed our bond, Wyatt. You threw me out into the Black Hills to freeze," Emma said, her voice steady and cold enough to freeze hell over. "But the goddess works in mysterious ways. You sent me directly to the king you tried to murder. You sealed your own fate." Wyatt lunged forward, reaching for Emma's dress in a desperate, pathetic bid for mercy. Before his fingers could even brush the silk, Silas's hand shot out, grabbing Wyatt by the throat and lifting him entirely off the ground. Wyatt gagged, his legs kicking uselessly in the air. "The punishment for high treason is death," Silas snarled, his eyes bleeding from golden to pitch black. "Wait," Emma said softly, placing a gentle hand on Silas's arm. Silas froze, instantly calming at her touch. He looked at her, entirely at her mercy despite his lethal hold on the traitor. "Death is too quick for what he did," Emma stated, her eyes locking onto Wyatt's bulging, terrified gaze. "Strip him of his wolf, strip him of his title, let him live as a human, cast out into the rogue territories with nothing. Let him feel what it's like to freeze in the dark, knowing he threw away his only salvation." Silas smiled, a dark, terrifying expression of pride. He threw Wyatt to the floor like a sack of garbage. "By the right of the Alpha King," Silas decreed, his voice vibrating with ancient magic that caused the very foundation of the hotel to tremble. "Wyatt Sterling, your wolf is hereby bound and severed. You and the Montgomery bloodline are stripped of all wealth, land, and title. You are banished from the Pax forever." Wyatt screamed in agony as the king's command forcibly locked his inner wolf away, breaking his spirit in a brutal, irreversible snap. Chloe sobbed hysterically, scrambling away from him. Emma didn't watch them drag Wyatt out of the ballroom. She didn't need to. The past was finally dead and buried. Silas turned to her, the dark, lethal fury melting from his eyes, replaced by an overwhelming, all-consuming adoration. He reached out, lacing his fingers through hers, the soul tether humming a beautiful, warm melody between their hearts. As the entire ballroom of Alphas and Lunas bowed deeply in absolute reverence to their king and their new queen, Emma smiled. She had been thrown to the wolves to die, but she had risen to rule them all. Emma went from a discarded, heartbroken Omega left to freeze in the snow to the most powerful Lunar Queen the werewolf world had ever seen. Sometimes, the universe has to violently break your current path to force you toward your true destiny. True power isn't about bloodlines or wealth. It's about the courage to heal when you are completely broken. If you loved this story of ultimate revenge and fated romance, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more epic werewolf dramas every week. Drop a comment below. What would you have done to Wyatt?